I really do believe that one of the most common pain points that small acreage landowners have when they're trying to improve their property for whitetail hunting comes down to just not having that understanding of where exactly they need to get started, and then also feeling like they need to maximize every single acre instead of just really narrowing it down to a few core areas and creating a very strategic and intentional approach. And a lot of this comes just from my own personal experience. When I had access to my first property that I could actually make improvements on, it was a 25-acre piece, and I felt like I needed to go out there and I needed to start working right away, and I needed to take advantage of every single acre that I had. I found an opening, I planted a food plot, I looked at the timber and thought I needed to thicken it up, and I went to every single tree I thought could put a tree stand in, and I hung one. And in reality, I was just spinning my tires, I was causing more harm than good, and it was simply because I didn't take a step back, take a breath, and figure out what are going to be the most impactful things that I can do on this property. I'm actually out here today walking around a 20-acre property in Ohio, right in the heart of hill country, and as I started breaking it down, it became very clear right away that this small property, just like a lot of other ones, only need a few targeted improvements to make it hunt so much better. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to pull out the camera and then just give you guys this behind the scenes look of what exactly goes into laying out a property like this and giving that framework of how exactly I'm going through this step by step, so that way if you're interested in improving your property, you know exactly where you need to start. And if you guys are new to the channel, my name's Greg Kazmersky. I work with landowners all over the place to design and develop plans for their properties to maximize the whitetail hunting potential, and I'm also a real estate agent here in the state of Ohio, focused on buying and selling recreational land. So whether you just bought a small property and you're looking for a place to get started, or you've owned a small property for a couple of years and you maybe have made an improvement here or there and things just aren't really clicking, in the rest of this video I'm going to walk you through the entire process of how I'm setting these properties up and everything I'm taking into consideration. The surrounding habitat, what all of that looks like, how I'm pulling points of interest off of a map, how I'm using those points of interest to build different habitat improvements, and really how I'm piecing all of that together to find the best stand locations and make this property hunt on its best day. Now to get started, we're not even going to look at the property we're designing. We're going to start with that surrounding habitat. I really do believe this is the most important place to start. Zoom out a little bit and ask yourself, what are those neighbors offering? How can I complement that movement, or how can I offer the deer something here that they don't have over there? I don't think that it's ever possible to hold deer consistently on smaller acreage properties. Of course, there's unique scenarios. Of course, you can build the habitat so they spend a lot of time there, but they're not going to live on there 24/7. Especially when we're talking about a hill country property like this, these deer are much more nomadic. They're going to bounce around from one ridge to the next. So I'm not going to try to force the deer to do something they don't want to do. I'm just going to make sure that when they're spending time on my property, they're doing so in a way that's actually going to benefit me as a hunter. So on this property, we zoom out a little bit. We get to the top of the ridge. There's this massive logging cut. I'm talking 60, 70 acres in size, and it's at that age range right now that it is phenomenal bedding habitat. There's a lot of activity once you get on that habitat edge. So knowing that we have that high quality bedding habitat right next to the property, that's how we're going to start stacking our habitat improvements. We know that we don't need to have bedding on the property, which is great because in these large drainage systems like this, access is very difficult because when you're coming in from the bottom, and if you have deer bedded on your property, it's very hard to get in. So all we're going to try to do now as we're walking around this property are figure out how can we create some major entry exit points coming out of that bedding area, and how can we stack things like maybe a small kill plot around some of the different features on our property, so that way we can create this concentrated flow of movement that's going to allow us to access some of our best stand locations. And just one more thing that I want to add on this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. Of course, with this property, we have bedding right next door. There's not a lot of food, so we're going to look at doing things like improving travel routes, maybe adding in a small kill plot. But say you're in farm country and you're completely surrounded by agriculture, maybe your best bet is adding in that bedding area because they already have that food everywhere. The key here is really just zooming out, looking at the surrounding landscape and asking yourself, how can I complement the movement that's around me, or how can I offer something on my property that the rest of the neighborhood doesn't have? So we zoomed out, got a really good idea on what's going on outside of the property. Now it's time to zoom back in and start to pick out those main points of interest that we're going to use to take our deep dive when we're out scouting the property and piece together our plan for this. Now when we're talking about hill country, our biggest asset is going to be the terrain. Now this is a really cool system on this property. It's this large drainage system. It's got a south facing slope, it's got the drainage top, and then it's got a north facing slope. Now the low 100 feet in elevation on this property is so steep and so rugged that it's really not worthwhile to try to develop it for habitat. Now I talk about drainage tops a lot in my content, whether I'm hunting public land or building a plan on private land. Anytime I'm in hill country, if I have a drainage top, that's definitely going to be a focal point for deer movement. So that was the first point that we marked on this property. From there, I'm just starting to backtrack from that drainage top and figure out, are there any of these features in the terrain that are going to narrow down that deer movement in any way? Now, sometimes these features can be obvious, but a lot of the times they're not going to be so obvious. Now, I look at a lot of maps, so it's easy for me to pick out these inconsistencies in the landscape, and it's what I call a micro feature. A micro feature is not going to be this big obvious thing like a drainage top. It's going to be this small blip in the contour line that to me signifies some type of change, some type of difference in elevation. And usually when we're talking about hill country deer, those subtle little changes in the elevation are going to narrow down movement in some shape or form. So at this point, we zoomed out, we looked at the neighboring property, know that it has really good bedding habitat. We know that our property is this big drainage system. It has the focal point of that drainage top, and when you backtrack off of that, we're able to mark out these little micro features that are going to be worth our time putting boots on the ground. From here, it's all about getting into all of those points of interest that we marked and start planning out our habitat improvements. So we've identified the main elevation band where we're anticipating a lot of the deer movement to be happening on this property. From here, it's all about figuring out what are the main habitat improvements that we're going to do to enhance that movement, to get the deer to work their way through the property the way we want them to, that also aligns with secure access and our best stand locations. So as I come in here and I look at the drainage top, it has this nice flat area that actually sets up really good for a small little kill plot. So coming in here, doing a little bit of clearing work, and implementing that kill plot is going to be a phenomenal setup for this area. Reason one, it sits adjacent to that bedding habitat, so it's very simple for the deer to come off the top of the ridge on the neighboring property where that logging cut is and drop right down into this kill plot. Reason number two, below that kill plot is this very steep, very rugged drainage. We're able to come up that extremely steep part and hunt right on the edge of that food plot, which is going to make it very low impact to get to one of the best areas on the property. As we start to backtrack our way off of that drainage top, first looking at the south facing slope. The south facing slope is the one that sits right underneath of that bedding habitat, and this is where those micro features are going to come into play. We marked out a few of them, and when we walked through, I was able to identify one that had this slight little washout that was getting started, and what it's already doing is pinching down deer movement into about this 100-yard little section, and there's these couple old logging roads that are through there. So these deer are really coming out of the bedding area right now naturally, hitting these logging roads and heading towards that drainage top. Now there's only one problem with this micro feature, and it's actually very common with these things, is that when they do get steep and they have these little washouts, they're so steep that in order for you to get above the deer travel, you're gonna have to climb 30, 40 feet in the tree. And I don't know about you guys, but climbing that high in the tree just isn't really for me. So what we're going to do is try to build off of this pinch point and then narrow down that movement even more. And this is really easy. All we really need to do here is drop a couple of trees to funnel down that movement. We're going to use one of those old logging roads as a template for a travel corridor, and we're going to take that 100-yard pinch point, narrow it down into about 40 yards, so it's already going to pinch down that movement in a way that's going to enhance our bow hunting opportunities. On top of that, we're going to go in and we're actually going to add in a mock scrape and a water hole at this location. My thought process behind setting up all of these different things is that if I'm able to encourage the deer to spend time in front of my tree stand locations for as many different reasons as possible, with the common goal of working through this pinch point and getting to that drainage top, there's a reason for them to come through this pinch point, whether they want to get a drink of water, whether they want to hit that scrape, or whether they just simply want the easiest path of travel to get over to that drainage top. To sum it up, my whole goal here is just trying to figure out how can I encourage the deer to spend the most amount of time in front of my stand location in a way that's going to already align with the natural flow of movement. Now, the last area that we're going to target for improvements on this property is on that north facing slope. once you get up to the top of the ridge on the neighboring property, it's just a ton of mature timber. So this area, this side of the property, isn't nearly as deer friendly. The habitat doesn't set up quite as good, and there's no reason for them to really be up on the top of the ridge on the neighboring property. So really what our strategy for this north facing slope is going to be is just to come out here and do a general thinning, just to make it a little bit more deer friendly. We know that that focal point around the drainage top with that kill plot is going to be there. We know we have the really good bedding on top of the south facing slope, so we just want to make this a more friendly place so that we're encouraging more daylight activity on the property. And we're really doing so with the intent of just learning this part of the property over time. But the whole goal with the north facing slope right now is just to simply make it more deer friendly, and then just encourage them to work their way into the better parts of the property, and then just also encourage them to spend more daylight hours on this piece. Last thing we need to dive into are going to be our stand locations. Now, I'm a firm believer that on these smaller acreage properties, it's all about quality over quantity. Just like I talked about at the front end of this video, I made the mistake of trying to put a tree stand in every single good tree that just seemed like it made sense, and I got burned so many times because I was really not hunting the property the right way. And I've really adapted that quality over quantity mindset on these smaller acreage properties, and I use it time and time again. And when we're talking about hill country, when we're talking about this big timber, I really do believe that you always have the opportunity to make that property a really good rut hunting property. And that does not take 10 stand locations on 20 acres. In this case, I think we're probably only going to have 4 stand locations on this entire property, which I'm going to go ahead and break down now. We'll kind of work our way around the property, starting with that south facing slope. This is that area where we're talking about enhancing the movement, adding in the mock scrape, adding in the water hole right around that micro feature, that little washout area where we're just going to try to pinch down that movement and create the focal point. I mentioned that there's this main access trail that comes right up the side of the drainage, so that's how the landowner is going to be getting into this stand location. And then all they're going to do is come right up that little washout. We got the tree picked out, and it's going to be overlooking that mock scrape water hole combo coming down through that pinch point. The first opportunity that this stand location is going to focus on is going to be when those deer are dropping out of that bedding area above, kind of looping around the point and then working their way to the kill plot. And by hunting this stand location instead of the kill plot itself, you're still catching that movement coming out of the bedding going to the kill plot, but you're not applying pressure to the food. Now, other than that bed to food movement, this is just going to be a great rut cruising location. It's on a bench that leads directly to that drainage top. In this case, it has a kill plot, and it sets directly below all of that really good bedding habitat. These benches are great locations to catch cruising bucks during the rut, and having that mock scrape and having that water hole here are just a couple more reasons for those bucks to funnel into that pinch point. You're going to have this really good thermal pull down with the steep ridge below you, and anticipating these bucks to be cruising this in the afternoon below that bedding area when those same thermals are pulling down, you should have a really good access. You should have a really good scent pull going back down the ridge, and there's all the reason in the world for the bucks to be cruising down this bench during the rut. Sliding over to the drainage top, we're going to be looking at our setup around this kill plot. Now, I mentioned that we're going to clear out this area about a 1/4 acre in size that sits right in the area of the drainage top. Very steep, very rugged down below. It's going to be a difficult access, but I'm confident. I've worked with this landowner before. I know he's going to get up there. I know he's going to have some really good hunts out of this. There's this great big beech tree that sits right on the edge of the kill plot, where when you look behind you, it's going to be this very steep drop off. And when I get setups that are right on the edge of these steep drop offs, you want to talk about having a thermal advantage. You're going to get that strong downward thermal pull almost all day long. And when we have that, we're going to be almost bulletproof when we come into this kill plot. Outside of a deer dropping out of that bedding area when we're climbing up, this is going to be essentially a no impact type of stand location, which is actually pretty incredible considering how deep into the property it is. But you're going to be completely blocked visually on your way in, and then when you get up into the stand location, you're going to have such a good thermal pull down that you're going to be able to continuously hunt this kill plot when the conditions are right, and you should have some really good hunts here. Now, of course, the whole idea behind this kill plot is to catch deer when they're coming out of that bedding area, but with it just naturally being at the drainage top, it's also going to be a location that if you plug away with some rut hunts, you should get that activity. Finally, we can shift over to that north facing slope. This is going to be that area that we talked about that doesn't quite have the draw that the rest of the property does. So our whole goal here is to really just start out with a couple observation stands. The first observation stand is going to be a very similar access approach to our first two locations. That's going to be underneath the area that we're thinning, and it's going to be directly in line heading to that small little kill plot at the drainage top. We hunt this in the afternoon, we get that downward thermal pull, and we're just trying to catch deer as they work their way out of this area, whether they're coming off the neighboring property or they're actually bedding somewhere in this thinned out area and they're dropping down and heading towards that kill plot. As we flip around to the back side of it, getting closer to that property edge, we're going to do the same exact thing for a morning location. We're going to try to get above the area that we thin, create some kind of main entry exit route coming out of this north side where we're sitting above all of that thinned out area in the morning. So ideally, if the deer are spending time down in that kill plot area, they're working back through that thinned out section and up and over this north facing ridge, then ideally we're just focusing on one of those main exit routes coming out of it, and really we're just trying to observe here. So this whole north facing ridge, we have two stand locations. In the future, it may be two, it may only be one location, or these two locations may be scrapped, because honestly, when we're talking about how good I feel like the kill plot location and that south facing slope location are, I really don't think you need anything other than those two stand locations to have success on this property. All right, guys, that's going to be the full strategy behind this 20-acre property. Remember, on these smaller acreage pieces, it's not about maximizing every single acre. It's not about trying to do every single habitat improvement. It's about finding those few key areas, figuring out what are the best habitat improvements that you can do, and doing your absolute best job at implementing them. Look at that surrounding landscape. Take a close look at what are the main features on the property you want to focus on. Figure out how you can implement those projects to complement those features on the property, and then figure out where your best stand locations are. It's all about quality, it's not about quantity. I have a lot more property visits scheduled for the rest of the winter and the spring season here, so if you guys like these strategy type of videos, or you have any other ideas on how exactly you'd like to see them broke down, please drop a comment down below. I'll have a lot more of this type of content coming out across the channel, so also make sure that you subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.